Delph is a collective architecture and design practice based in London, working on all skills of projects. The firm stands by exploring and creating spaces that make meaningful and positive impacts on the way we live, work, and play. And through a fresh approach to every project, they let individuality lead to the projection of joy and connectivity out of project. So we thought that it is fitting to chat about architecture as a learning space for generations with Alex Raher, the director and co-founder of Delph Architects Day. So thanks a lot, Alex, for being here.
No problem. Nice to be. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. Will you tell us about your background and about the studio?
Yeah, sure. So myself and my co-founder, Edward Martin, set up the practice around 4 or 5 years ago. And we've grown as a collective into a team of 10. And we work on a range of projects between residential, education. We do some work in the public sector, public spaces, and sometimes some sort of installations, small scale interventions in the city as well. But our background is primarily education and residential work as a sort of design-led collective in London.
Cool. How would you describe your design approach then, and what inspired it?
I'd say that we set up the practice as a collective of people who are design-led and want to be curious through design. The name Delve, it stands for being explorative, being curious, investigating. So we always interrogate the brief. It's one of the first things we do. We're always challenging ideas, and so our design approach, I guess, is explorative and curious, and really never sort of working to the norms, always trying out new things.
That's cool. So aside from that, what do you think about architecture as an avenue of learning? Maybe not only for the designers, but also maybe for the users?
Yeah, I think it's really critical. I mean, at the moment, we're working with a lot of nursery schools of early years education. We've completed some projects in that sector. I think it's crucial, really. I mean, education is a fundamental element to our society, and I don't think you can say that architecture is the most important part of that. The people who are educating and the providers of early years of primary and higher education facilities are the most important people. But I think design offers an opportunity to create those spaces that improve well-being and improve the space that you can learn in. So I think we have quite an important responsibility as designers to sort of create those spaces where the avenue for learning is easier and a better facility to be in.
Yeah, maybe, and also like spaces that spark conversations, that can also be an avenue for learning.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, just creating little interventions in a space where people can meet and have interactions that maybe they wouldn't have done unless you create that sort of opportunity. So, and it's the approach we do with early years, because they're an interesting client to work with. But the way young children use spaces is very different to older children or adults. So it's quite an intriguing way to sort of set out education parameters.
How have you crafted spaces that foster connectivity and joy?
I think this comes down to our design approach, really, as a practice. So as I mentioned earlier, the way we set up the company was to really be explorative and interrogate people's briefs before we start putting design ideas forward. And we always want spaces to feel like they're individual and fun. Color's a big part of our work. We want design to be dynamic, and we want it to sort of sell and sing the personality of the users who are appointing us to design for them. So I guess it's about creating interest and joy through personality, I guess, in our design.
Mm-hmm. And then outside of the social aspect of the outcome, how do you approach sustainability in your practice?
So I mean, probably 3 things that we look at would be health and well-being of users. So generally bringing more light, fresh air, understanding how people are using a space and making sure that's improving the overall well-being of the people there. From a building fabric point of view, reduction of carbon emissions through increased thermal efficiency. a lot of the work we do is on refurbishment. So we're taking existing building stock and making it a much higher performance. And we question whether sometimes, should you build or should you keep existing structures? Sometimes we'll actually suggest doing less construction work because, the construction industry accounts for something like 40% of carbon emissions across the globe. So it's a huge consideration and sort of responsibility. And in that sense, we'd also look at materiality as a key part with embodied carbon, kind of a cradle to cradle approach where we look to try and specify materials that can be regenerative, like timber, or recycled materials where possible. And there's some pretty amazing suppliers out there now. So yeah, I think that's probably our key approach that we would take on almost every project.
That's really nice. Do you want to maybe share one or two of your projects that show us just that?
Yeah, sure. So I mentioned we work with some early years nursery providers. We've just completed a fit out project of a former warehouse in East London. It's called the Learning Tree. It's for a nursery client we've been working with for a number of years. What we did is we took the shell of the space, and we decided we would pretty much try and avoid any plasterboard, any paint where possible. So we took a timber approach to all internal partitions, and we fitted out this 5,000 square foot space into a 100-child nursery, sort of centered on a sort of dining core that acts as the center heart of the building. And it's been really successful, and I think the children have really engaged with the idea of the natural materials. We've used recycled rubber flooring, used sort of low VOC finishes with the cladding internally, and natural pine timber for all internal partitions. And that was kind of one of the driving concepts, and it's really helping sort of educate the young minds as well about why it's important to think sustainably through design.
That's sweet. Lastly, in your opinion, how can a transformative architecture help enhance interconnectedness between people and the environment?
Yeah, sure. I guess sometimes I think in construction and in architecture, it's slightly disconnected from maybe everyday life and everyday users who maybe don't know much about how the construction industry works, or this sort of elements of a built project and how it is put together. So I think maybe a bit more transparency on that and education between professionals in this environment and how we deliver projects, and the responsibility of bringing a more sustainable approach to how we build and what we deliver is really important. I think maybe also just allowing an opportunity for people to improve their own well-being without necessarily needing to pay thousands of pounds for new built work. We're looking at this approach for a competition we've entered recently for the sort of home of the future, and how could we allow users to maybe adapt and grow their house in a way that's more sustainable, and understand how to improve and regenerate your own property without needing to buy new materials. And maybe that's it. Maybe just a better education on how the built environment works can connect us a bit better to sort of our own individual impact on the natural environment. But that's a pretty big challenge.
Yeah. I do agree with you that, having that better quality of life, I think sustainability should be accessible to a lot of people and not just a selected few. So I think, my favorite part about this interview is when I asked you about how you approach sustainability, you immediately answered health and well-being. And I do think that personally, having that personal connection between a space, users, and users between users is really nice to have in a work of architecture, because the impact can be beyond how it looks.
Yeah, thanks. No, I think it's important, isn't it? Because if you can't have your own opportunity to improve your own way of being sustainable, or sort of seeing how you impact the environment, how can we expect millions of people to change the way they live unless you sort of give an opportunity to it? And I think it has to sort of work both ways. It can't just be policy driven. I think it has to be educationally driven, so that younger people now are understanding why it's important to think that way, and or even on a sort of basic approach of why you do certain things and why you're going to affect the environment and what you do. But I think sometimes as architects you can get a bit carried away with sort of the wider macro level solutions to problems, when actually we should be thinking a bit more user centric, I think, and people based. But
can't think of a better way to end. Thank you so much, Alex, for sharing today. Really appreciate it.
No, nice to speak to you. Thanks for having me on.